You can't please everybody. You know, we're impartial. We don't pick sides. We come in and we gather facts, but there's a human component of it as well. But, you know, it's hard because you want to make everybody happy, but sometimes you just can't.
I just started to really find honestly, a passion and a joy for if I saw someone, whether it be in my personal life or at work, that was, you know, being taken advantage of or something like that. I found joy in helping that person or standing up for that person or confronting who was taking advantage of that person.
I didn't have a plan. I had no idea. I did know that the options that were being presented to me weren't the options I wanted. Not that they were bad options, it's not what I wanted. I didn't want somebody else to make that decision for me. So one of the ways that I kind of focused on what I wanted to do was that I'm bilingual, and I'm really good at being bilingual. So I started volunteering, and I volunteered here at this department in the sheriff's office, and then I saw patrol officers interacting with the community, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. That's how I want to help all the people that grew up just like I did. And explain to them that there's options. It's just that once you get to a point where you're making a decision, you need guidance, you need family, you need support. And in our case, in law enforcement, we interact with people in the community that don't have that. And it's astounding to me that people don't have that until they meet up with us. And one of the most compelling things that happens to me is somebody might be in the back of my patrol car and they don't know me, and they tell me I'm a good person.
I wanted to be a police officer, then, you know, high school years come around, and then all of a sudden it's F the police, and, you know, I'm all about like rebellion and all this stuff. And it's kind of, I think, a natural process in my culture specifically, just trying to find yourself. I didn't have a father around. I didn't have a good male role model in my life, so it's natural to rebel. I did martial arts. During the martial arts, I met a lot of good police officers. I met good military people. I met good firefighters. They kept my head straight. The funny thing is, I started coaching gymnastics, and Ronnie Shepard came back around, and I was coaching one of his kids, and he was a beast, is a beast still. He's a legend in this department. He's a black officer, an officer of color. That was something that really stuck out to me, because you always think it's going to be a white cop or something like that. It's not going to be a black cop. But he was a very positive cop. He worked out, he trained. I think he's my motivation for staying in shape as much as I can, and always pushing my limits. And he still remains to this day my greatest inspiration to be a police officer.
One of the most memorable moments is when I spoke to a really young girl. She was 10, and her parents are immigrants. She's a first generation US citizen, and they were having problems. As you know, COVID-19 affected a lot of people, the family dynamics, lots of families being together. And I went there because she had made some statements, and people were concerned for her welfare. So I show up, and I'm bilingual, so I'm going back and forth, English, Spanish. So I'm facilitating going back and forth. And at some point I realize that this young person is coming out to me, and her mom isn't catching it completely, because there's a cultural difference there. And she thinks she's going through a phase of something, and I in my head, I'm trying to catch up, and I'm like, holy smokes, this is like a profound moment. Wow. And those are the kind of moments where, like, she's gonna remember me at this moment, because she is telling her mom something just, holy smokes. Like, here I am in the middle of this huge thing, and just saying a huge thing is just, it doesn't even describe the magnitude of like the emotion involved, and you know, the heaviness with it. And her trust that I was the person that could help with this conversation. And I think I learned more that day about courage, and about like fear, and about having faith.
But I started going to a community center off duty. They got to know me as Mr. Adam. And then it actually was the Dallas shooting when the 5 cops got killed. There was something in the air, and at that point, because I was going off duty in street clothes, they didn't know what I did. And then I told them what my job was, and it was just it was an amazing interaction because a lot of kids in that part of town didn't have the best views towards police, but at that point they'd already got to know me as Mr. Adam, and I'll never forget that because it was just seeing the kids' reaction and the relationship we had already built really stuck with me, and just having those conversations at that time really something I'm not going to forget.
My fondest memory is probably that I met my wife while I was on patrol at UCCS. She was a student employee, and she was working at the front desk of the University Center, and I met her that way. And a couple friends hooked us up later on after she stopped being a student, and so that's my favorite memory, and is that I met her here while I was working here.
My favorite thing to do is be out in the community, partially because that's what I learned from people like Ronnie Shepard and different other police officers that were positive influences in my life. They didn't stay in the patrol era, they stepped out of it and interacted and were willing to tell me when something was wrong or right in a graceful manner. And so my favorite thing, without a doubt, is like playing football with kids. You know, I remember one call I had, it was a hard call, and the sister was a victim of a crime, a very serious crime, and she was a teenager, and her younger sister was out dancing, and I went out and I was like, "What are you doing?" And she was videotaping, so I jumped in on it. I didn't know she was recording a TikTok video, but that's probably one of my, because she I guess she shared it, which I didn't know, but it was cool because I got to play with her, make her laugh. And then the sister that was a victim of the crime, she's rolled. I mean, and it was when you can challenge a negative situation and bring positivity to it, that's it. That's my goal.
This job does change you, right? When you're dealing with what we have to see, because think about it, when do most people need to call police? It's going to be probably the worst day of their life, right? If they're calling police to show up. And we're doing that daily, so we're showing up to your worst day of your life. And I've done this 8 years, and it has its effect, right? So I wouldn't be able to say like one specific thing, but just the consistent and the overall weight that can be on, especially good cops and ones that really take it to heart. I think that would be the hardest thing, of what it does to you and how it affects your mindset, your personal life, and we really have to be very proactive in counteracting that.
So this is, sexual assaults, and anything that has to do with children. Those are always the most heart-wrenching ones.
And depending on the type of people that are in there and how the relationship is, here's two strangers, because it's always a 2-officer call, that are in somebody else's house, basically saying, "What's going on with you and your wife?" Because we have a statutory obligation if somebody calls. So it's very interesting to, when you go on arrest, we'd arrest men and women, it depends on the situation. And those can be very, very volatile situations.
And sometimes children don't know what is going to happen to them, and children are all innocent. And so, when you respond to someone that's attacked someone innocent, it does take a toll on you. And I know police officers that have had to respond to dead children. And it's the reality of life. You see death, and you see the lowest points of humanity. And many times children are involved, and elderly are involved, and people that can't fend for themselves, the weaker, are involved in those. And those are always the hardest. I don't think those will ever be, it doesn't matter if it's a sexual assault, domestic violence, traffic accident, just a regular death. Anything that has to do with an innocent person, or someone that has innocence or purity about them, and it gets stripped, whether it be sexual assaults or children being corrupted or harmed, that's going to take a toll on you regardless.
The challenging calls were cases involving children as victims. It could be neglect or abuse or homicide. I had cases where children were killed. Those are extremely difficult cases to investigate. And if you're the lead detective on a homicide, you have to attend the autopsy of your victims the very next day. And the toughest assignment for me was attending those autopsies of children. I happen to have 6 children, and if there was an autopsy on a child, sometimes I asked my partner to attend. That was the most challenging for me.
In 2015, we had an employee by the name of Garrett Swayze, and he responded to the Planned Parenthood shooting that was occurring off of Centennial. I was on-call supervisor that day, and so they called me to tell me that Garrett was going, and I came into work and didn't know that I wasn't going to see Garrett again. So I was a lieutenant at the time, and really after finding out that Garrett had been killed, it was all about how to help the department move forward, how to help his family move forward, and try and prepare everybody for what was to come. And it's been 5 years, and we still think about him, and wish that he was here. And going through that was definitely the hardest thing that I've ever gone through in my professional career.
The positive thing about COVID is that it taught us to think outside of the box and to think about new strategies and new ways of interacting, and it didn't make us afraid to try something new. We still interact with people regardless, whether COVID-19 is there or not. If anything, wearing the mask makes it uncomfortable, but we're still going to go to the call, we're still going to respond. And so I think that might be the most challenging, is having the mask.
You guys are calling us for help. We know what we signed up for. And, we'll put a mask on. But other than that, we're going in. And once things are a little slow, slow down a little bit, then we can be a little more careful where we make sure, if we have to arrest someone, that person has a mask on. We go through all the different protocols, all that stuff.
I think we're going through it together. Everybody's been impacted by COVID, but we still go out and have a job to do. We're still going to the calls for service. I think things slowed down for a time, but we know the significant impact it's had on our community. I see it with our kids at school, the social and emotional needs. I see that kids are behind and feeling stressed and, frustrated. We've seen, suicide increases and stuff, and that's hard for us. That's hard for families, but it impacts us too. I think you get into this profession because you care about people, and when people are suffering, it bothers us as well.